Okay, next up, taking a peek at the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen inside of the Ford Escape. Now, this thing technically does have two different options that are available. So this is obviously the smaller cluster screen. We do have one that's fully digital as well. This is the smaller one that we're walking through. So if you're looking for a walkthrough on that smaller screen, check down in the description. You can also find a walkthrough on the Sync Media screen down in the description of the video as well. But let's dive into it. So the steering wheel inside of the Escape might be heated or might not be, just depending on which version of the vehicle that you're in. So this specific one does have the heated steering wheel, and the button is right down the middle, right there. So we could toggle it on or off if we want to. Just look on the bottom right side of the screen. Adjusting the steering wheel is going to be a manual telescoping process. So just by our left knee, we've got a little release there. So just drop down, and like I said, telescopic. So in, out, up and down to find that perfect position. Click it, lock it back into place. So very straightforward there. Now, let's kind of move through. First of all, I love all the little glossy highlights that are through the steering wheel. We do have a series of different switches too, so along our left knee, so we can use in order to be able to adjust what's going on with our light sources. So you can see there, different lights are available. I always just recommend keeping it in the auto mode. And then we've got a few other buttons in order to adjust what's going on with the brightness of the screen. So if we wanted something brighter, darker, whatever the case may be, we do technically have that flexibility as well, which is great. Now let's move through. We're going to go through the different buttons here, sticks, and then through the screen. So this one just has regular cruise control, but we do have the option for the adaptive cruise control system instead. Inside of regular cruise, we're just going to turn it on this way. And then once you get to cruising speed, you're going to either press up or down on this, and that's going to set it. And then you can either increase or decrease 1 kilometer or 1 mile per hour at a time. There is also this button, and that's going to be for our lane keeping system. So it used to be a button on the tip of the left stick. It's now just a hot button instead in order to toggle the system on or off. And you can see there, we do have a nice display when we have that system toggled on. That actually kind of looks pretty sharp. I like what Ford's done with that. It's nice. Now we could fully customize this cluster screen as well to a degree. I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. But back to the side here, also a few other options. So we can increase, decrease our audio there. There also is a voice command prompt here. Now, because this is just the base vehicle, we don't have anything outside of using it as our Bluetooth for our Siri Assistant, so Google or our Siri Assistant, and that means that we do have to be hooked up through our phone in order to make it work. But inside of the larger screen, we could also use this in order to navigate to different destinations. If we wanted to do things like make phone calls, we wanted to change temperature, change radio stations, things like that, that would give us that flexibility. It's just that in this base screen, it's just for our CarPlay Assistant instead. Buttons along the right-hand side are going to be for a few things. So we can either answer or hang up on a phone call. We can change songs or radio stations. So if we turn audio on, so we could button press left, right, whatever the case may be, in order to jump between our presets. So it's a preset jump left or right there. But if we do a press and hold, that's also going to give us the flexibility to be able to navigate through the different stations this way. So we're changing through different stations that way instead. So you've got a few different ways you can move between stations. And then we've got a series of buttons here, and these are going to let us move through that cluster screen. But before we get there, stick on the left side is going to be for our high beams, turn signals, all that fun stuff. Along the right side is going to be for our front windshield wipers, and there's a button on the tip of that stick for our rear windshield wiper on top of that. We're going to pull in towards us for our front windshield wiper fluid, and we're going to push away for the rear fluid. So very straightforward. Now looking at the cluster, so what I'm going to do is zoom you in, and we're going to navigate through the cluster using the buttons along the right-hand side of the wheel. So let's zoom in a teeny little bit there. There we go. And focus, yeah, there we go. So along the left-hand side, we can see what's going on with our temperature gauge. Along the right-hand side, we have our current fuel level. And it's kind of neat the way that this is displayed, so we can kind of see how much fuel is left, either using this, or along the bottom right, we can see how much fuel we have left as well. Whether or not our auto start-stop system is engaged, so we can toggle that system on or off as necessary. What gear we're currently in, so park, reverse, neutral, drive, or our dedicated low gear. We've got our outside temperature and the current kilometers that we've traveled inside of the vehicle. Now I did mention we've got the flexibility of customizing this a tiny little bit. Not a big amount of customization, but just a little bit. So we're going to use the pad off to the right-hand side. So we can just do a basic back in order to get rid of a few things and just go to our basic tachometer speedometer view instead. And even so, we can tweak this a little bit if we turn our lane keeping system off. So as you can see there, we remove and we have just our digital speedometer instead with our traditional type of like gauge over top. But if we push this button, that's going to give us a few other things. So we've got my view, trip, fuel, etc. So let's move through. So we go to my view and what's showing up? Do we want to configure it? So which things do we want showing up here? Do we want our eco coach? Do we want tire pressure? Things like that. And that's going to be the view that is right here. Oh, actually, let's get rid of the menu. Right here, there we go. So we go up and down and we can see there are a few things off to the side. So as we go up and down, that's essentially which page we're on. So we've got our trip 1, trip 2 counter, fuel economy, and our eco coach. But what shows up here is going to depend on which view we're currently looking at. So we can configure the view to go to different options and subscreens and which things do we want added in. If we go to now playing, that's going to give us the option of moving through different audio, our trip counters and things like that again, and back to audio. We go back into my view. We've got our trip 1 counter, fuel economy, tire pressure as well. And then as we go to all of these subscreens, this is going to jump us into just trip and fuel counters, but is it trip 1, trip 2, fuel economy, things like that. So if we go trip counter now, we're in trip 2, trip 1, etc. If we ever want to reset one of these counters, all we're going to do is just press and hold the OK button. And that's going to reset for us. So very straightforward there. So that's just general rule of thumb. If you ever want to reset, you're just going to press and hold OK, and that's for a series of different things. We press back in order to just get rid of that screen, or we press the menu button to hop back inside. We can look at basic status info, so who has what seatbelt on, is our start-stop system rolling, what's going on with vehicle maintenance, so do we want to look at our tire pressure, oil, things like that. So if you're changing out oil yourself, you do have the flexibility of resetting that back to 100% if you want. Back again, we've got audio, so do we want to change between AM, FM, Sirius XM? I do have a USB device connected, so we could also toggle our audio system on that way instead, and one step at a time. Audio inside of this thing is pretty good all at the same time. So we do have the flexibility of moving between different audio sources right through the menu here on top of that, which is great. So AM, FM, Sirius XM, etc. Navigating through, oh, I missed our presets. So you actually set the presets through the media screen, but we could also look through and select a preset right through the middle screen here instead, which is useful. And back again, we've got our phone settings, no phone connected, so that's currently grayed out. But with our phone connected, we'd be able to look at our missed calls, we could make phone calls and things like that. Looking at our settings now, we've got some options for our display. So this is where we've got the flexibility of customizing how this main part of the display looks. What do we want showing in the left gauge? So do we want nothing? Or do we want our tachometer? I'm going to select nothing to show you what it looks like. And as of right now, it's in our rounded speedometer gauge, or we could just go digital speedometer. And then we could also choose secondary. So if you want to have miles and kilometers per hour showing up, that's where we would go there. But we got rid of a few gauges. So let me show you how that looks now. So let's get rid of our menu, and we've just got this naked screen instead. So there's nothing else on it. So if you're more of like a fan of a calming type of a view, you've got that flexibility. When we turn our lane keeping system on, same idea. That's going to give us a slightly different look, or we can press back in order to get rid of that sub screen, and we've just got our lane keeping system going on. So on the very bottom of the lane keeping system, you can see a few different lanes there. So as we start to drive, when the vehicle recognizes lane markings, it's going to go green. If you start to veer over without signaling, it's going to go red, and then it's going to either gently shake the steering wheel or nudge you back into your lane, depending on what you've set up through the media screen. But like I said, if you want to walk through on that media screen, you'll find it in the description of the video. But moving back through, and let's go back to our menu again. Back to settings, and that's the basics for display settings. Back down again, we've got all of our base settings here again. And we can jump back and then customize the view that little bit. So I do like that we've got the flexibility of customizing this thing a little bit. So if you're a fan of having that tachometer, speedometer view, you've got the flexibility to do it. It's not a traditional view tachometer though, like if you saw that earlier. So you can see there, so it lets us know what our RPMs are off to the side there. It's just not full like traditional tachometer where it's like left versus right screen. So, but you could customize it that tiny little bit, which is nice. And I know that's A little bit, but not all at the same time, but that's everything you need to know about the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen inside of the Ford Escape.